Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
The Libertine-in-Chief, the Golden Stallion, here for you for another great episode of Sovryn Tech. And today I am joined, that's right, the Rembrandt of the podcast canvas is joined by the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Thank you so much for being here.
What are you talking about?
Oh.
I have kidnapped her.
What have you done with Stephanie?
I have taken her hostage.
Natalia, what are you doing here?
I'm going to torture her with a feather.
Oh, I love it.
Just kidding. Hello, I'm here.
Awesome. Yes, thank you for being on. And of course, yes, you do the voice of Natalia in my new intros. And as usual, you do a phenomenal job. So,
well, thank you very much. That was a really fun voice to do. I think it came like straight out of your spank bank, because you have a thing for Russian accents.
Yeah, I do have a thing for Russian accents. This is true. I had a Russian nanny, but I'm not going to go any further than that with that story. So
boundaries, Brian.
That's right. So let's get into actually the rapid fire stories. Let's do this. And if anyone's listening today, don't worry. Sex and Science Hour is coming out this week.
At some point, I think Sovryn Tech has gotten quite a new following from Sex and Science Hour, huh?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. So, and that is very much due to you.
Well, I'm really glad we can share Sovryn Tech with a bigger audience. But, Sex and Science Hour, it's funny because I feel like I can say this now because we're not actually on Sex and Science Hour.
Right.
But we started Sex and Science Hour and it was kind of a joke. I mean, not a joke, but we didn't take it super seriously. We kind of got asked to do a podcast by Adam B. Levine for the Let's Talk Bitcoin network. And, we didn't think that it was going to get nearly as many listens as it does on a consistent basis. I don't know why people still listen to it. I mean, it's an okay show, but it's not particularly informative or serious or anything.
Well,
Maybe
it's not
just
serious. I think it's pretty informative. I think some stuff gets laid out that no one would hear anywhere else, or especially in the Bitcoin community, that really I think no one else would dare say.
Yeah, perhaps because they keep coming back to it. I mean, and I'm glad for that. It's kind of funny because we both, you've been doing Sovryn Tech for a couple of years, or for
almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years, yeah. And I did my own podcast for a while, and we never got nearly the amount of plays that Sex and Science Hour gets.
Yeah, and I think that's what you mean, is that we've yet to put in as much effort, per se, into Sex and Science Hour as we've put into our own podcasts that we've done, like Sovryn Tech or Pork Therapy. But your old podcast, Pork Therapy. But yeah, it gets just tons of downloads, and people absolutely love it. So it's weird.
It's an irony, yeah.
Yeah, it's
maybe
an irony.
Not a joke. A joke was the wrong way to describe it, but ironic.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Yeah, it's not a joke. We take it very seriously. We enjoy doing the show, and we enjoy connecting with people, and especially when we hear that, it's people have found their anarchy through that show.
That really made my day. I mean, I did not expect that, but we got an email recently saying we've converted another one to anarchism.
Especially when it's women, because that's what everybody says is, women just don't care. Oh, no. You just got to make it important.
You just got to make it sexy.
That's right. You got to make it sexy.
You just have to tickle them with a feather until they break.
That's right. So let's tickle some feathers with our rapid fire stories. And then we have kind of an interesting overarching main story to talk about. Amazingly, and I'm not going to go into how this gets done, but I want people to look into it for themselves because it varies upon model. So it wouldn't do any point in me discussing how this is done, but something I talked about pretty often, and that I think I was pretty ahead of the curve on, everybody knew about this, just nobody really wanted to talk about it, was that the firmware in ARM-based devices, like cell phones, tablets, and whatever, they have what's called a baseband chip, which is the baseband is the firmware. And this baseband firmware is designed to accept any communications that come into it at any time. It is the most insecure thing you could possibly have in your life. All right. And so Snowden apparently came out and said, well, there is actually, or at least a bunch of people, maybe Snowden just kind of corroborated it, said there's a way you can set your device into this almost a standby mode to where you can be as sure as possible, because even if your device is off, it can still receive signals to the baseband chip. Okay. And this is like the way to know that no one is listening to what you're saying via your cell phone or tablet or whatever. So people can look into that. It's called the baseband chip, and how to kind of turn that off.
How do you do that?
There's a special mode, almost like a hard reset. iPhones can do this too, which is interesting, is that iPhones have the same setting that can do it.
Well, hang on to your current phone, because the next generation of phones that comes out isn't going to have that feature,
maybe they
right?
won't allow for it. Well, I mean, one could say that this ability, this cold standby mode, is necessary for development, but maybe then they just turn it off when they send it out to people, and you'd have to get your phone into developer mode or something. So it's interesting.
And of course, you can be prevented from having someone listen through your phone, but if there are other devices around, then forget it, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. You can do it to your phone, but what are you going to do about the person's phone who's walking their dog or whatever the case may be? I mean, certainly, we can go into the discussion of, exercises and futility if one thinks that way. But if you're interested in it, I mean, there's points, honestly, where I've had conversations with you, Stephanie, where we've walked into a far off room. And, and I said, it's like, no, leave your phone over there. Well, we're going to go talk over here, So, I mean, there's times where I think that's necessary, regardless of whatever the circumstances may be.
Wouldn't you love to know what we talk about when there are no cell phones around?
You can only imagine what I felt was so important that nope, no cell phone.
I mean, because if you look at the things that we do talk about on the air.
Yeah, right. It's not like we were hiding our sex life or anything. Which, by the way, real quick, you know what? Sex by a hot tub is kind of difficult. It's hot. It's hot. It's incredible. Hot. But to get off, I think there's some blood vessel dilation issues that occur. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you get into a hot tub, you're raising your temperature of your skin, and so all the blood vessels in your skin dilate. And your skin is a huge organ. It's the biggest organ in the body, right?
Thank you.
So
right. Sorry, skin. Yeah.
So if your blood vessels are all dilating, that's a big amount of blood that's like going to your skin and not to other parts of your body. Yeah. Like perhaps those that you might need to function sexually.
To perform with.
Yeah. And by the way, men and women both have the same physiology in that department, right? Like we all need the blood vessels in our junk to dilate in order to have fun.
Yeah,
in that
absolutely.
Way.
So, it was hot.
All you got to do is just get out, lay on the side for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And you're good to go.
Pro tips on Sovryn Tech right here for you. Anyway, speaking of another pro tip, I guess you could say, I know a lot of people don't like the use of that word, but I did it. Something I talked about before is that Steam, ironic, hot tub Steam, but I'm actually talking about the gaming platform for PCs. Steam finally came out and admitted that early access games do not have to be finished. And this is something I talked about in a Game Talk, a segment that doesn't exist anymore, a while back, where I said that, it's like, look, I don't know that these early access games, which are not even beta, they're like alpha, you purchase them, some of them sell for $60, $70. There's no guarantee that the developer's ever going to even finish the game. And now Steam has came out and said, guess what? That's absolutely true. There's no guarantee that these games are going to get finished. So in my opinion, what I would like to see, the market signal I'd like to see sent out, is that people do not purchase these early access games, because I think that's just...
So a technical question here, because I'm not a gamer.
Sure.
If a game is not finished, is it still playable?
By and large, but it'll be buggy.
Okay.
Or it could be missing entire swaths of the game, like entire sections, entire... different modes of the game or whatever.
Right.
I think it's a waste. I mean, it's a waste of money, in my opinion, in the first place, because you never know that it's going to get finished. Okay. And then it's a waste because aren't you going to, I mean, is it, especially some of these games that are like story based, you're going to, I mean, you can't just keep replaying the same story. Are you going to want to replay the whole story all over again after it comes out? It's the worst. It's one of the worst ideas in gaming history, in my opinion, is this early access business.
Well, so do you have to pay again to get the end of the game?
No. Once you pay the early access thing, you got it. Now, sometimes they throw in perks. That's the thing, is it's not.
Oh, wow.
Like, I would think that would be a good selling point, is if they sold it at some kind of markdown, but they don't.
Yeah, authors don't do that. Like, they don't release the first draft of their book before they're finished with it, or the first 10 chapters, as far as I know.
That's not how it was, but Kindle, Amazon is starting to change that to where they have Kindle serials, I think they're called, and people will release a chapter a month or something like that, and you'll pay for each one.
A little bit different, because it's not like they're releasing a finished chapter.
You're right. It's still different. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're still getting a finished product. But then I wonder with Kindle serials, I think that's what they're called, not Kindle singles. This is a different, or maybe it's Kindle Worlds. I wonder if they have a requirement to finish the story. Maybe they never have to. I don't like this. I get it. Like, it shows an incentive to the author or to the creators or the developers or whatever. But I think this is just, it's a recipe for fraud. And I don't dig it at all. So anyway.
Does Steam take Bitcoin?
No, not
okay,
yet.
Good. Because I was going to say, people taking Bitcoin pre-orders.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Don't they know the lesson?
Trick in the book.
Exactly. You can get Steam gift cards though, but with Bitcoin. But anyway, moving on. A little correction from I did a special that a lot of people enjoyed, which was my top 8 nonfiction books of all time, and I made a huge mistake, and I don't know how I did this, but Max Stirner is not French; he's German.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I totally screwed that up. So anyway, when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Unlike some other podcasters, not to be named, when I'm wrong, I'll tell you. And I'm full admission. So I don't know how I botched that up. I think I just have some obsession with French anarchists.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true.
That's what it is. Michel Onfray, anyway, or Michel Onfray, right? Let's see. Amazon has a device unveiling on June 18th. It's probably going to be their phone, and we're going to talk about the other big companies here in a minute, but there's kind of the big 4 now. It always ends up being like 4 big companies, and it seems to be Amazon, Google, Apple, and Microsoft. Though Samsung maybe would be the big 5. But anyway, we won't be talking about Amazon today, but when that unveiling happens, I will talk about it on Sovereign Tech, of course. Speaking of Microsoft, China has banned the use of Windows 8 for its government officials or for its government workers, which...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Well, they're concerned. They're saying it has to do with energy and security concerns, which certainly if someone wanted to bring up security concerns with Windows, that's not unfair. I don't know what exactly is more. There's XFCE, LXD, and a whole bunch of other like Linux environments, I'll say, that would be more efficient battery-wise than Windows, but I don't know that Windows is that much of a battery killer. So maybe I think they're concerned about NSA stuff. Windows 8 is, if you configure Windows 8 properly, Windows 8 is just it's a fine desktop. It's not Windows 7, but it does just fine. And I mean, it's an acquired taste, but you can configure it. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If you configure it, if you grab a program like Start8 from Stardock, that'll pretty much turn Windows 8 into Windows 7. And so at that point, Windows 8's fine. And there's some nice...
I need to get this.
Yeah, there's some nice little features for Windows 8 that I think are worthy of getting into, including there's a Chrome build a build of Chrome that's 64-bit finally coming out for Windows. And in fact, Windows 8 can really make use of that more so than any other version of Windows can, security-wise. So there's something to be said for Windows 8 at times. But anyway, there's another interesting story. A new study apparently proves that the moon was created by a collision. From another planet. Like a planet.
Proves. Okay, that's a strong word.
Yeah.
What's the evidence?
The evidence is various elements found on the moon. That was one of the original things. This is actually this is kind of an older theory from the 70s, okay, that stands up to that. And there's quite a bit to it. The link can be found in the show notes, but essentially they're calling this body Theia, this planet that came in. And this is coming from RT, not a crackpot news service. Okay. And Theia apparently collided into Earth, and that's what smacked off a huge part of the moon. Now, the interesting thing for me with this story is that in 1972, okay, it was when that theory sort of kind of came into fruition. But years before then, a guy named Zecharia Sitchin wrote a book called The 12th Planet that said that there was a planet called Tiamat, okay, that actually existed. Earth didn't exist in the solar system, but there was a planet called Tiamat, and then this other planet, just like they're describing now, this planet swoops in, hits Tiamat, and Tiamat splits in two, or splits kind of in three, because it helps create the prime asteroid belt. That's actually the name of it. And it creates the Earth and the moon. Okay, and that's from the remnants of this, interstellar game of billiards that essentially occurred. I just find it fascinating that now they're saying that it's a planetoid by the math, okay, that it's a planet that actually hit it. But then they were saying that Sitchin was nuts when he wrote The 12th Planet.
But that's a kind of a different story, right? Because the official story now is that there was a planetoid that smashed into the Earth and broke off a chunk of the Earth, and that became the moon. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a difference there, but the part that isn't the difference is that there would be a planet that would actually swoop into our solar system, which he was told he was nuts for. Okay, and now that's not so.
Right.
Or at least now there is some official science kind of backing it up. So let's switch gears. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, I want to talk about real quick. There was the big, the WWDC, which is Apple's big event, probably their biggest event of the year. They have a couple now, but this used to be the only one, and it kind of got the reputation of being the big one. I want to talk about that, but before I do that, this is going to be 3 updates from Microsoft, Apple, and Google, all of which are pretty interesting. And the one from Microsoft I want to talk about first, and this is Skype Translator. And what this is it's technology. This is at the Code Conference that Satya Nadella, pushed it out there. It's technology that essentially allows Skype to, within almost real time, that close, translate what a person is saying to you in another language. Okay, and this is really fascinating. Like, they had someone speaking in German and he spoke in English, and they went and they had an exchange back and forth, and it worked pretty well for what it did. I mean, that's pretty awesome. So a lot of people are hailing this, though, as like it's the coming of the universal translator from Star Trek, right? Or it's the Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And my problem has always been with these kind of technologies. Okay, or the Babelfish is ridiculous because it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Okay, because there's so many things in other languages that do not translate. They can't translate. Okay, it's just like when you talk to some of these, like some of the more hunter-gatherer cultures around the world. They don't. A lot of them don't understand property. In fact, they don't have the linguistic framework for certain concepts. Yeah. Right. And in fact, they take our word cargo. They have to use our word cargo because they have nothing else like it, to express it. And so I worry that, I don't see this as everybody's so excited about it, but I think there's going to be some real problems. And I think a lot of the reason that people are happy to be online and talk with other people online, be it on Facebook or whatever, is for the future opportunity to fuck them. Okay. I think it's true. And I think these language barriers are not going to get bested by computer algorithms.
But what about for business?
Oh, it'd be fantastic. I can see a lot of, and for like coordinating developers and all that stuff, I think it would be great. Okay. That's still kind of like, you could still have language barriers that affect business. You could. Yeah. Business, especially like in Japan. Oh man, you've got a lot more than just the language to deal with. And that's the thing too, is in Japan is a great example, because in Japan there's so much said that's with body language over there. And it's not a joke. There's real body language you've got to pick up on. Okay, that would make that work. The telephone, a lot of people don't realize this, the telephone didn't take off necessarily well. The cell phone didn't even take off. The smartphone didn't take off well up until pretty recently. in Japan because there is so much you can't say everything in Japanese via voice. It's not possible. Okay. In fact, most phones over there are connected through their computer, not by their not by smartphone. Like having a phone connected to a computer was a very popular thing over there. And so, I don't see, everybody's hailing it as this wonderful thing. I don't see it as anything worth hailing. Okay, it's cool. Yeah, it could be handy for some things, but there's a lot of things that are just not.
Well, that also means it's like it's listening, and would it be keeping records of whatever it translates, right?
Yeah, well, and Skype's notorious. People have known Skype was,
malware
has
essentially.
Been malware essentially for as long as it's existed. It's been recorded by various bodies, and so why people still use it, I'm just. My mind
There's not a great alternative.
They're out there. Jitsi, Viber. Well, some people wouldn't like Viber because, it's developed in Israel. The Jews! But there are alternatives to not allowing at least Microsoft to have a recording of every damn thing you do.
The Jews didn't develop Skype, huh?
Well, yeah. Nope. Anyway, so there's that technology, and I'm going to actually talk about language a little more later in the show. We've got a really special climax prepared for people.
Oh, very special.
Yeah. But the next thing I want to talk about is Apple, and the big announcement really isn't. Yes, I'm glad that iOS 8, they announced iOS 8 and they announced a new version of OS X. Called Yosemite, but iOS 8, I'm happy that it's being opened up. Like, it's not so closed source. They're allowing people to write in. They came up with a new programming language based on Objective-C called Swift, I believe, and that's exciting. All that stuff is really cool. I was very, very pleased to hear Apple opening up its ecosystem quite a bit. My concern, though, or not my concern, the news that got out that didn't get a lot of fanfare, at least not from the mainstream tech press, was that they said they will essentially allow Bitcoin apps, or they will allow, money transfer apps, which Bitcoin would fall under.
That's kind of an important distinction. Did they say Bitcoin specifically, or
no? They did not say Bitcoin specifically. They just they just said transaction. They more specifically said transaction apps. It wasn't an offhand comment, but we haven't heard the full report because WWDC goes all week. Okay, and so we haven't heard the full story around this yet. Really, only other than that if this currency app, whatever, it follows the local laws, they will allow it into the official Apple App Store.
Well, that seems like a loophole because it's so there are so many. Okay, like Lyft, Uber, they don't follow local laws, right? Airbnb,
right? But now in Virginia, Uber's getting shut down.
Right, but is Apple going to ban it from people who live in Virginia or just from the entire store? Right, like
that will be an interesting thing to see. Is that if Uber's apps get banned, what does local mean? Yeah. Now, their words were definitely local. So, but I guess that opens a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
Because does that mean nation? Does that mean state? Because
are they going to be detecting your location to determine what apps you can access?
Right, and does that mean when you cross the border from Virginia to Maryland? Because no doubt about it, Maryland is a completely separate country. The people in Maryland are inferior to the people in Virginia, right?
No. No.
When you cross to Maryland, can you suddenly download the app?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, this stuff gets crazy. So anyway, but they are allowing for it, and that's
this is all just speculation. Like I'm seeing it reported as Apple allows Bitcoin apps now. But that's not really what's going on.
No, and that's one of the points. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of the points I want to make is that this is rampant speculation that they're going to allow Bitcoin apps. It is the language. That's why I said that, I was kind of hoping to hear more throughout the developer conference week, but no more info has come out unless it's on the Bitcoin Talk forums. And at that point, guess what? It's not important to me. I don't care. So last time I was on the Bitcoin Talk forums, everybody was just asking for regulation. So why the fuck would I bother being there? You know what I mean? Like, there's just people arguing back and forth.
That's a shame, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah, combined with sorting through all the millions of threads, who has time for that? It's like a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if someone thinks there's something important on there, please, you can email me. And this has happened in the past. People will email me, sovereigntech@riseup.net. Let me know if there's something on there you want me to talk about. But by and large, if the whole argument is about, should we regulate, I really don't care. But let's get into something that may be beneficial to people.
Oh, good.
And this is something that I can't believe. And when I read it, I had to, I was looking for the April 1st joke. I was looking for, I still can't believe it, but it's real. And that is that Google is implementing in Gmail PGP encryption, OpenPGP. And they're making an extension for the Chrome browser, so this can only be used if you're using Chrome. And you will essentially be able to send, there's not a whole ton of details on how this works. Does it, like if you send a PGP email from Gmail to a Yahoo account, will it work? We're not entirely certain on that. Okay, but the fortunate thing is...
Are they just doing it so people like import their keys and then they have access to all these people's PGP keys?
Hey, maybe. I don't know. I am so... My mind is literally blown that they are interested in this. And the reason is, and I've talked about this before, is it is positively antithetical to the business model of Google. If you go encrypting emails, they can't scan your emails and they can't find out what ads to send to you.
Right, unless it's a honeypot. Unless the whole reason they're doing it is as a honeypot, because then they get people to import their keys or whatever, and people import their keys, or they get people to send emails that they believe that people think are encrypted, but really Google can read them.
Right.
And then they have all this more information about you, even when you believe that you're not being spied upon.
Yeah, it's strange, and I want to believe. I want to believe. I want to believe that they're doing this for all the right reasons. They
can't
recently
really believe that.
No, I can't.
At this point,
I can't either. Now they have said that they will no longer scan the emails of businesses that use G apps. They will no longer scan the emails of students that use G apps. These are previous stories. Okay,
but all the rest of you poor saps are still going to have your emails scanned. How does this even compute? Like, where did they this is the thing I said. I was like, look, unless Google is going to put in end-to-end encryption, which PGP is, okay, for email, unless Google's going to put in end-to-end encryption, I don't think they care about the privacy of their consumers. And now they are, and it's out there. It's in public beta, essentially. There's got to be a trick.
Kind of a closed beta.
There's got to be some kind of trick.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just totally kerfuffled. I don't
what's real.
I don't know what's real. I don't understand. Now, some people have theorized, some good friends of mine, and I've actually said this way back on Sovryn Tech, was that I think there's a civil war going on, and again, other people have theorized this. There's a civil war going on in Google. Google is such a massive company that there is the don't be evil side, kind of the classic Googlers, and then there is now the evil side, which is who's implementing most of what we have now. Okay? And that maybe this is just the classic Googlers getting in a little bit of something. But boy, I don't know. It's ironic. Like, I wonder, Vic Ventura, he got his walking papers and left. And now suddenly Google Plus is getting decentralized, and we're starting to see the effects of that, actually, because Hangouts, the Hangouts app on your phone, will no longer take you to a Google Plus profile. It'll actually take you to your contacts. So that's a degree of separation there. Okay. And so suddenly Vic leaves. Suddenly we're getting PGP encryption email, which is the best encryption on planet Earth. Suddenly we're getting, some separation from Google Plus. Is there this huge paradigm shift going on at Google? I don't know. I'm positively mind boggled. So you seem, Stephanie, to be completely untrusting of this.
Yeah, I just think however much money the NSA could give them to amass a database of people's PGP keys that they probably use for other emails and whatever, and get them to enter their passwords for those. would far, far, far outweigh any revenue that they could possibly get from giving people ads for diapers and stuff on the side of their Gmail.
Well, this is what I wondered, okay? This is kind of the theory that first came to my mind, was that they're really putting in PGP, and they're doing it because the NSA is not playing ball with them. Yeah, because they keep changing that bill. There's that bill going through the Senate and whatever, and it just got so watered down.
What bill?
A bill for essentially kind of reining in the NSA's powers, and supposedly giving supposed to be giving these companies the ability to let their consumers, let their users know what's, giving them more transparency, letting them know what Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, all of them are doing more when working with governments. Okay. But that bill got completely watered down, apparently. And they were, and the companies were mad about it, were at least openly mad about it. And so I wondered if this was Google saying, oh yeah, well, fuck you. Here's PGP encryption on the largest email service in the world, which Gmail is.
That's a nice thought. I just can't really trust it for my own safety.
Yeah. No, I don't.
Self-protective thing.
Right. I don't blame you. And there's certainly other options out there, or maybe they saw the writing. Maybe Google saw the writing on the wall that, Proton Mail, Mailvelope. There's a lot of very simple solutions for great email services.
Well,
all of which we've talked about.
That would be great, because that means that people are actually affecting what they do with their actions. They're voting with their email, essentially. Yeah.
Or maybe they knew about Reset the Net that started on June 5th. Okay. And Reset the Net was, is this movement to get people on board using encryption, that it's hashtag Reset the Net. You can find out all about it. The EFF's holding it. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit about it later on, because they're doing a big push for Tor. But maybe they saw that and they said, hey, wait a minute. People are taking this seriously. People are going to run away. And I'm not the only one. I said this before, that I don't use Gmail anymore, and I recognize the convenience of using it, but I use GMX. I heard Leo Laporte said the other day on Twit, he's like, yeah, I don't use Gmail anymore. I went to Rocket Mail.
Rocket Mail. Sorry.
But I was shocked. I was thinking, I was like, okay, so a lot of people really are saying, hey, we don't trust Google anymore. And boy, especially if Leo Laporte says it, man, that's a finger on the, that's a finger on the pulse right there.
Right.
And so I wonder, maybe they're scared. Maybe they know that this is what people want and they're finally putting it in. But would it be there to stay? How well is this actually going to work? The bottom line is that I wouldn't hold my breath for it until some real security researchers get their hands on it and look at that code. When Steve Gibson and guys like that start saying, yeah, no, this is solid, then maybe we can talk about it more.
Good idea. Closed source cryptography.
But shocking stuff from the big three. They're really all of these things are out of place for them, in my opinion. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
We're on the brink of a global finance paradigm shift, and at the core of this movement, Bitcoin. But many early adopters need a safe, stable, and secure method of storing Bitcoin that doesn't require an electronic device. Enter crypto cards, the world's first BIP38 passphrase encrypted, laser-edged aluminum offline wallets. Crypto cards are the same size as a credit card, only they're scratch-resistant, waterproof, and flame-resistant up to 600 degrees. Unlike paper wallets, they won't ever rip, fade, or crumple, and the high-density aluminum is rated to last 75 years. Your coins will be secure for as long as you need. Having Bitcoin physically allows you to store them in a secure location instead of on a networked computer. This is key. Your funds will be impervious to hacks and the negligence of third parties. It's a truly trustless system. You hold the keys, you hold the funds. For more info, visit cryptocards.co. We ship worldwide, and using the code FTL, you'll save 10%. We're proud to be part of a liberty-oriented movement, and the future is looking bright.
Hello, Mr.
Sovryn. Brian Sovryn. And yours?
Natalia. Care to play a game of roulette?
I'd love to.
Number and color?
69. Black.
As you wish. Tech roulette.
It is time for Tech Roulette. False start there. But we'll roll with it. And this is where, of course, you can send in stories to me, sovereigntech@riseup.net, or on Twitter, or even Google+, wherever. you can get in touch with me and send me a story, and I will talk about it. So, and I've actually, with the new format that we've had since episode 75, I've had more time to get into a couple stories, but I think also what this is going to allow for, the having more time, is to allow my guests to really say a lot more. Of course, Stephanie, you've been on the show before many times, and we've never really had problems getting our points out. So, but this story that I've got this week, I think deserves a lot of discussion because it's a little creepy. In my opinion, it's a little creepy. I think a lot of people get worried that I say the word scary a lot.
There's a lot of scary stuff in the world.
There is. There really is.
And a lot of creepy stuff.
A lot of creepy stuff. I mean, there's a lot of governments out there that allows for the word scary to be used at any time. So anyway, but this story is from RT, one of my top news sources. And thankfully for my listeners as well, as they sent this in from RT, and it's Americans prefer Bible over Darwin's theory of evolution, according to a survey.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. So, and of course, this is Sovereign Tech. It's science and technology. It's not just tech. We talk about it all. Okay. And I'm going to read into this and then, whoa boy. The majority of Americans believe that humanity was created by the Almighty, that's with a capital A, or guided by God in its evolution, a Gallup poll reveals. Only 19% believe humans evolved from a more primitive form of life without any help from the celestial powers that be. The Gallup poll shows that most Americans do not subscribe to Darwin's theory of evolution, preferring the Bible's explanation for the origins of the human race. And of course, being Americans, that means the Judeo-Christian Bible.
Of course, yeah.
The U.S.-based research company put the following questions to 1,028 Americans. So there's our sample size, a little over 1,000. Which that's actually a pretty good sample size.
Pretty
since
good.
Gallup will often run off of 16 people. And that's ridiculous.
1,000 is respectable. That's for a poll. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad. So, question: Which of the following statements comes closest to your views on the development and origin of human beings? One is, human beings have developed over millions of years from less advanced forms of life, but God guided this process. That's one. Number two, human beings, these are choices you have. Human beings have developed over millions of years from less advanced form of life, but God had no part in this process. And number three, God created human beings pretty much in their present form at one time within the last 10,000 years or so.
Well, they're missing an important option.
And that
is human beings evolved over millions of years from less advanced creatures, and there is no God.
Well, that was number two.
Right. But it said God didn't.
Yeah, God had no part in it. It was still saying that God was there. Right. So I'll read on a little bit. The results show that 42% believe God created humanity in its current form in the last 10,000 years, while 42% think that humans have only been around. Oh, man.
That's higher than I would have expected because...
Same here.
Like, from what I understand, the percentage of Christians in America is about... Well, I guess it's about 75%.
Yeah, I was going to say it's about 75.
Yeah, but I would say less than 50% of those are actual, real Christian. I don't know.
They're not young Earth creationists.
Christians that go to church often and are into Christianity. So maybe 42% is actually correct.
Yeah, maybe. All right, we'll go on. While 31% think that humans evolved from lesser advanced life forms, but God guided this process.
31%?
Yeah, I think that God was still involved.
That's depressing. So it's almost 75%. So that lines up with Christianity pretty well. Yeah. It's almost 75% that believe that there was some involvement of a God.
Yeah, which I think gives us credibility because those numbers add up. With the amount that with the amount of Christians that are supposedly in the country, the numbers add up.
Yeah.
And so the remaining 19% subscribe, of course, to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution of species. The poll taken in May also showed that this is fresh. Out of the respondents who attend church on a weekly basis, 69% believe God created humans in their current form. So they didn't come from Neanderthals. They didn't come from Homo evolutus or
in the last 10,000 years.
Yeah.
So if you go to church, you're 70% of those people believe that are essentially young Earth creationists.
That God made Adam. Only one weekly churchgoer out of 100 believe in Darwinian evolution.
Wow.
Yeah.
The 1%.
The 1% believe, yeah.
That's very interesting.
Which I think Ron Paul actually falls under that. For the liberty-minded listeners, Ron Paul believes that evolution did occur, but God had a hand in it.
I thought he was a young Earth creationist, but...
No, and he had that 50 Liberty Points book or whatever, and the opening to that book was him saying that he believed that that there was,
I think that answer is like, it's trying to make everyone happy. You know what I mean? It's trying to like cheap. Reconcile. It's a cop-out, basically.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I'll talk about that more. Interestingly, the survey shows that the number of Americans adhering to a purely secular explanation of the origins of the human race has doubled since 1999. So at least that's good. 19% is a double.
But that means before it was only 10% of people believe that evolution occurred without the guidance of some supreme power.
Right.
Wow.
Gallup has also
Brian,
said...
I think I'm feeling kind of depressed. I think I need to lay down. This is really sad and depressing.
You lay down. I'll believe me, we'll get rid of that depression. Gallup also said that those who adopt a purely religious stance on the issue of creation tend to have lower education levels. That's in quotes. So I don't know what that means. But however, the study says it is unclear whether more education can change a person's religious convictions. Now, I want to comment on this part of it real quick, because lower education levels, what does that mean? Because I think going to school actually hinders one's education. One's personal knowledge, one's personal intelligence is hindered by the public school system.
Well, if they're talking about, quote, higher education, then that makes sense, because people who go on to get advanced degrees or even college are less likely to believe in creationism.
Sure.
And they're more likely to be atheists, actually.
Sure. Maybe that's what they mean. So that's in quotes. I don't really know what they mean by that. But I won't go on the board saying that, well, just because they didn't do well in public school, that makes them stupid. No, I would say quite the opposite. Perhaps.
Well, a lot of public schools actually teach creationism. They're like, evolution is just a theory. There's a couple other theories, and one of them is that God just waved a magic wand and then people were created.
Yeah, some degree of a push for that, certainly. In March, an investigative report revealed that nearly $1 billion in taxpayer money will be given to private schools in the U.S. that teach creationism. So the government is funding creationism.
Separation of church and state. I mean, obviously, it's just a happy, feel-good thing. It's not really happening.
Yeah. Journalist Stephanie Simon of the Washington, D.C.-based publication trawled through hundreds of pages of course descriptions, textbooks, and school websites to see what kind of curriculum is on offer in private schools in recipient of public subsidies. Simon concluded that many of these schools went much further than merely teaching creationism, and they actively sought to discredit the secular world, or the secular worldview. That's in quotes.
Wow.
So
you gotta, school prepare. What they always say is school prepares kids for life. And if you're out there teaching them that there's a sky daddy that creates organisms, I mean, that isn't going to jive with their observation that when they get some infection in a cut or something like that, and there's antibiotic bacteria evolving resistance to the antibiotics, like that's not going to really square with that observation.
Yeah, no. Now, this is obviously, I think this is creepy. I think this is strange that the evidence stands so tall. Now I'll be the first one, and I've done it often. I've done it on this show. I've done it on Sex and Science Hour. I've done it in any public forum I possibly can, where I've said, look, there are holes in the theory of evolution. There are problems. Okay, there are issues with our understanding of history. There are all these things, but I am boggled that 73% or so. By their addition, 73% of the country believes that God was involved in creating humanity. And in fact, I mean that 31% or 42%, the largest number, 42% thought that 10,000 years ago we were literally created.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's so funny because they're taking these stories so literally. From Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. But yet they think they're thinking critically, but they're really they're saying, well, no, I've looked at the evidence of evolution and it is not true. But they are not thinking critically, because if you critically read the text, there are some real problems there. With the creation story, there are huge, huge issues that nobody wants to discuss.
Well, Brian, that's why you just have to have faith.
Yeah, right.
That's their answer for every problem. I mean, right? Yeah, evolution doesn't have that. You're not supposed to have faith in science. You're supposed to see evidence that convinces you and satisfies you. But with Bible stories, it's all about believing without evidence, which is what faith is.
Yeah, and I have a problem with this because you know what? I would love, in fact, email me, sovereigntech@riseup.net. I would love to have a Christian on this show talk about this and why they believe it. Look, when I was a Christian, I believed in the young earth. Okay, in the young earth theory when I was a Christian. And I tried to back it up with as much evidence as I could. But eventually you get to a point where you just go, no, this isn't so. But the point I want to bring up is that if you discuss these critical issues with the creation story, or you go into like even the Tower of Babel, which is a really interesting, speaking of the Babelfish and everybody speaking the same language, you go into the Tower of Babel and you discuss some of the issues with that. What do people say to you? What do Christians generally say to you? They say, well, look, you don't understand the Bible. And it's like, no, fucker, I'm quoting chapter and verse. How can you tell me I don't understand the Bible? They just instantly insult you. And when you want to have a conversation with them, it's like, no, look, with the story of the Tower of Babel, okay, which happens right after all the wacky creation stuff. Not even getting into, it's like, okay, so who exactly did Cain or who did Cain fuck? I mean, like, this is one of the biggest glaring stories is when Cain goes off to the land of Nod or Node, however you want to pronounce it. It says he goes off with the other sinners. This is what the book of Genesis says. Where the hell did they come? Where did they come from? Who are these sinners that exactly he went and talked to? Because as far as I read, there's only 4 people on fucking planet Earth right now.
Yeah.
Okay? And then you get into the Tower of Babel story, where humanity, after God commits this genocidal act against humanity by wiping out everybody except for 8, maybe 9 people if you count King Og, they want to build a tower. Okay, the Tower of Babel, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody can speak the same language, so everybody's able to really do these amazing things, as humanity. And he says, look, and who knows who God's talking to when he says this? He says, we need to stop them because they'll be able to do anything. And I say, and I sell that to people, and I'm like, look, I'm reading this, and I hear fear from God that he's afraid of what humanity can do.
Yeah, but he can do anything, so why should he be afraid of these little puny humans, right?
Exactly. And so then he confounds the language and makes everybody speak a different language at this point. Please read it. Read chapter 12 of Genesis, chapter 11, chapter 12 of Genesis, because it should creep you out. By the understanding of it.
Brian, you are a real Bible geek, and I mean that in the most complimentary way. You are so knowledgeable about the Bible. You've obviously read it and studied it and thought a ton about it, and you're an atheist, which says something. But I think you may benefit from realizing that these Christians who tell you, oh, you've obviously never read the Bible or you're ignorant about it, it's never going to be enough for them. There's nothing that's going to satisfy them unless you agree with them that you've read the Bible enough for their liking. You know what I mean? So don't take it personally when they say that.
No, you're right. And this is the argument that's the worst. And it makes everything fall apart. And anytime I've brought up this argument, it usually ends up with even people that, I have a friendly relationship with. It ends up in them just screaming. Okay, because what they'll tell me is that you have to really understand the Bible, you have to pray. You have to pray to the Holy Spirit to give you understanding. And I think
so it's not enough to read it, you also have to pray?
Okay, yeah, but the Bible says that you should do that. So that's fair. Fine, I should do that. But then you're telling me that everyone that understands a verse or a whole book or a chapter, fuck the context, okay, different from you, what spirit was in them?
Yeah, who were they talking to?
Yeah, like who exactly? It's like, who did they get their understanding from? Well, the Bible speaks differently to everybody. Then what the fuck is real?
Yeah, that sounds like something that's just designed to keep you in a constant state of confusion so that you're easier to control. I mean, that's what it is.
Absolutely. And look, I was an ardent Christian, unless somebody's going to tell me, no, you've always been working for the devil, which in that case, look, he's my dad. Satan's my dad. What do you want me to do?
What?
Okay. No, I'm just kidding.
You're the spawn of Satan now. Okay. I see how it is.
But this is just, I really cannot believe this. evolution, scientists do need to address the very serious holes that exist in the theory of evolution. Okay?
They're not as serious as requiring the existence of faith in a sky daddy.
Precisely. That's the thing. So anyway, you can email me. If you are a Christian, please, we can have a nice conversation about this.
Hey, Brian, what's that funny sticker over your laptop webcam? I was trying to spy on you while you were in the shower, but now I can't.
See, that's why I have it. And it's from EFF.org.
EFF, what's that?
It's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, totally donor-funded organization that fights for internet freedom, privacy.
Wow, that sounds great. So EFF.org, I support internet freedom and privacy, and maybe you do too.
Yeah, and you can support them with Bitcoin.
The Electronic Frontier Foundation at EFF.org. You're a lucky man, Mr. Sovryn. Not many win so well at the game of chance.
That's because it's not a game of chance, Natalia. It's a game of choice.
Game of choice.
It is time for Game of Choice, where we get to, it's pretty much Game of the Week, but I get to talk about a game that's coming out, one that maybe never made it, or a game that went under the radar, or maybe a classic that I think deserves a good reinstall. And this week, I would be remiss if I did not celebrate the 30th anniversary of this game, because it is 30th anniversary as of yesterday, June 6th.
There's only a few games it could be.
Yeah, and this is one I think that you're a bit of a fan of yourself. So, and Stephanie, the game is Tetris.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I love Tetris.
Yeah, made 30 years ago. Unbelievable. Alexei...
Natalia is like a Tetris champion.
I'm sure she is. But Alexei Pazdanov, he made this way back in 1984. He was one of the rare few thousand...
So Tetris was born literally a few days after me.
Yes.
That's so cool. Because I just turned 32.
Right. Yes. And please.
I just turned 30 also, not 32.
Birthday wishes, of course, to Stephanie on Twitter. If you want to send them in, of course, I sent my own, and we had quite the birthday
great celebration.
Yeah, it was.
The 20s went out with a bang. The 30s went in with a bang.
Yeah. Anyway, so 30 years of Tetris. Boy, it's hard to believe that anyone out there has never played Tetris before. But this, ironically, a lot of people don't know, it was based on a game, like a real board game, or it was a wooden game.
Oh, wow.
But this wasn't something that was, it was designed in a lab, yes, because it was designed, the game was actually designed by Alexei to, test out the hardware. There are very few computers actually in 84 in Soviet Russia, or at least very few computers that we would understand as computers back then. He was one of a few thousand people that had access to one.
Hey, and in Soviet Russia, Tetris plays you.
Waiting for that. But Pentaminos was a game of like 5 blocks where you kind of put them together and they came in a little box, and sort of like a bento box. And it's... it was just a fun little game, and so he did it as a way of essentially testing the RAM, more or less, of these computers, and it ended up, of course, it came out for the Game Boy in the late 80s, and the rest, as they say, is history. 30 years of history, because when it came out for the Game Boy, oh man, I mean, everybody knows the music, everybody, it's just a game, and it's a game that never stopped. They still make editions of it. EA, I think, owns the rights to Tetris now, unfortunately.
Who composed the music?
Oh boy, I don't remember.
Was that part of the original game, or did it come in later?
Well, definitely the Russian flavor came from the Russian invention of it, But the music itself was, somebody from Nintendo had to have come up with that. Though, actually, Tetris might have been an arcade game before then. So this is terrible that
it's just such an iconic song. It's part of the game, that I think everybody knows the song. So
I'm not going to do it that way. That way nobody kind of starts humming it. I don't want to be an earworm for anybody. But anyway, so yeah, just a great game. And again, it's still being played it gets released pretty much any system out there, any game system, or even, mobile system now, will release some version of Tetris for it. And it's still a moneymaker. It's just one of those games that you can keep playing and playing for 30 years. Pac-Man's the same way. There's a lot of these games, and they're worth talking about, that people still play the shit out of. Donkey Kong. I mean, there's tons of them. So, I mean, when did you play Tetris on a Game Boy, or what was your first experience?
I've spent so many hours playing Tetris on a Game Boy, but I think the first time I actually played it was on the Macintosh computer. That was my first ever computer. This was around age 5 or 6, probably.
Black and white, right?
Yeah, black and white.
Still better than that puke green on the Game Boy.
It did have, oh yeah, I remember that green. It did have Tetris on it, so I played it on that computer, but it didn't have the music because it didn't have any sound.
Oh, yeah.
So I only encountered the music when I got my first Game Boy, which was probably around, the age of like maybe 10 or 11.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and then I spent so many hours on the Game Boy playing Tetris. Yeah. Got pretty good at it, too.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those games that actually, like a lot of games people feel doesn't do anything for you. I think Tetris actually is a good brain exercise.
It helps you pack into spaces more efficiently, like in the car. It's almost like 3D Tetris when you're packing for a trip or something.
Yeah, that's kind of the new meme, right? It's like, all right, we'll Tetris it in. Anyway, we'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. Go play Tetris while you're listening to the show. What the hell?
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
If you had to pick the most important person in American history, George Washington would be at the top of many of our lists, and deservedly so. As much as George Washington wanted to have children with his wife Martha, they weren't able to. Now, back then, childlessness was usually blamed on the woman, but Martha Washington was a young widow who had already given birth to 4 children when she and George got married. She was clearly quite fertile. A fascinating article in a medical journal has suggested that it was not she, but rather George, the father of our country, who was sterile. And George Washington had contracted tuberculosis when he was only 19, shortly after he'd also caught smallpox. Now, rampant diseases like these are some of the reasons why so many young people died back then. Now, not only was tuberculosis a leading cause of death, but it could settle in the abdomen and then in the genitals, which could result in sterility. Now, based upon careful evaluation of the symptoms that Washington had, this appears to have been the reason why he and Martha never had children. For those of you who aren't able to conceive, you're clearly in good company. One of the best and strongest men in our country's history appears to have been in the same boat. Now, I've posted a link to this fascinating article on our website at 90secondsonsex.com.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
You are quite the man, Mr. Sovryn. Are you busy tonight?
Natalia, if you'll excuse me, I just received a very important email.
Later then, Mr. Sovryn. Important email.
Actually, you know what, Natalia?
Yes?
I'm not busy at all tonight.
Oh.
And,
this is quite an exciting revelation.
Oh, boy. Anyway. I gotten great response. A lot of people really love the new intros, and I'm glad. It keeps things fun. And,
they were fun to me.
Yeah, maybe around episode 100, we'll do a new story.
Part 2.
We'll do a new script of some kind. So the further adventures of Natalia and Brian Sovryn. Anyway, it is time for listener emails, or important emails, I should say. And you can email me, sovereigntech@riseup.net, with any question you have. Believe me, you can ask me anything. This is a science and tech show, but I will address anything you want. And I've gotten all kinds of crazy questions in the past. And actually, if you have questions about history, I love talking about history. It's kind of a little secret I've admitted to a couple times on Sovryn Tech, is that I'm really, like, the whole tech enthusiast thing, it's sort of a side job. In reality, I'm just a historian. But anyway. So last week, I talked about Everything is Broken, this great write-up by Quinn Norton. And
that was so good.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I didn't get to read all of it, unfortunately. I hope a lot of my listeners did. And a lot of my listeners did, and they had some questions. But the main story, or the main question that a lot of people seem to have was that, how did we get this far if everything kind of sucks? If like all the coding languages suck, if all the hardware is rough, if everything is broken, how did we get to really an impressive point in technology leading up to the internet, whether or not the internet is the most efficient thing, to do with data communications. And I thought it was a fair question. And so I wanted to extrapolate on that a little more. And then I got other questions about polyamory. And so maybe we can talk about that. But the whole point, how we got this far, let's say, in my opinion, and this is not discussed in the article, this is just my personal opinion on it. This is not Quinn Norton saying it. She's great, though. Is that before you used to, and this is a real problem, okay? Because before software, before the internet, software had to be good when it got put on the store shelves. You could not have those bugs.
Because there was no way to update.
No, there was no way. You'd have to get like Windows 3.1, okay? Up until when Windows 3.1 for workgroups came out, Windows didn't really know what you were talking about wanting to connect to the internet. What the hell do you mean? And or even, networking in general wasn't necessarily, that's why there was Windows 3.1 for workgroups. And so Windows 3.1 had to be absolutely solid. Now, a year or two down the line, you could release like Windows 3.1.1, you could release an update disk or something like that. But by and large, all this stuff had to be great from the get-go. And this is interesting because it brings up the early access games and everything. This stuff wouldn't fly. 20, 15 years, even just 10 years ago, I don't think it would have flown. You had to have a solid product out there, because lives depended on it. Okay, in almost a real sense. And so that's changed. Today, people will willfully release things with bugs, and they will use the mass adoption of, say, even something as important as an operating system, perhaps the most important thing. They will use the mass adoption of a new, people's hunger for a new operating system, and they'll just bug test on the fly. And that's bullshit. I've had that before I ever read Everything is Broken. That just kind of confirmed the point. I've had that issue, and I know I've talked about it with you, Stephanie. You knew it as soon as before I even finished saying it. You knew that, back then it had to be good because there's no way to update the software. So that's
of course, not everything was good back then. We should avoid falling into that trap, but
that's right.
More stuff was at least finished.
Yeah, or at least it was solid and relatively secure. So, and if it wasn't, usually what people did is they went out and built their own because they had the knowledge to do that. Okay, so the software I wouldn't say was superior. We have great software now, it's just phenomenal. But I think the coding mentality, the mentality of the coders back then was way more on point. And they, they'd spend all night. I'm not saying that's healthy, but they'd spend, sleepless nights trying to get this stuff ready to ship,
What do you think the incentives are that are causing that? Is it that people are paying for unfinished software? Is it that there's pressure to get it out as soon as possible, or competition, or what?
That's a good question as far as the incentive. I think part of it is that now, a lot of the software jobs have become 9 to 5. And so when 5 o'clock strikes, well, I know today's release date, but it's 5 o'clock, I'm out. So there is kind of a loss of passion for that. I guess, this happens with any medium, is that you have the passionate few who are not doing it for the money. I mean, how many people are getting computer jobs now? Not out of a passion for great code or out of a passion, for computers per se, and I mean that in less of an abstract. They're just doing it because that's the job. That's the high paying job. I think there's very few. I don't think like Quinn Norton said, I don't think there's that many great coders out there anymore. And being a great coder, one could say, well, you're born to be a great coder. I think it comes from an innate passion, and that passion's gone. Now, part of what caused that, or do you have a point?
I'm just thinking about that. I mean, I'm completely ignorant of software of what makes great code. I couldn't look at code and tell you if it was good or bad or even understand it. But it definitely seems like it's really tedious work to code. Yeah. And that's the stereotype, but it's totally true. So do people who don't enjoy it actually last as coders?
Oh yeah. I mean, how many people work jobs that they hate?
Well, I suppose, but if you really hate it that much, do you end up as a software engineer and at a senior level? Can you really do that for 10 years, 15 years,
Yeah, I think that holds up. I think they will keep on doing it. Yes, it's tedious. But it's only tedious for people who don't see it for the art that it is. And there's people who consider it a fine art.
But you're saying most people don't see it as a fine art anymore.
Not anymore.
And they're just doing it as a job. So I'm just surprised that there are that many people that last. But maybe people do just work at jobs they hate and expect to hate their jobs. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the mentality, going...
Computer science is growing as a major. It's one of the most popular majors, right?
But it's because it's guaranteed money.
Mm-hmm. But that's, from a certain perspective, that's good because people are going to college for something that's actually going to help them earn money, and it justifies the cost of their degree.
Yeah, and I think, I want right? everybody to know a little bit of code. Like, I really do.
Yeah, I want to know a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know where to start.
There's, there's people out there suggesting, look, don't teach your kids Spanish. Don't teach them another language. Teach them a programming language. Okay? And I think that's great advice. I think all of that is really, really great to know. Okay? But I think the other problem that arises out of this, and this is what I was going to say earlier, is that a lot of people just start thinking, it's so damn cliche, they start thinking within the box. And they don't actually want to think outside of it. A lot of the great code, a lot of the great people, the development of Linux and so many other things came from the fact that a guy said, you know what, this doesn't do what I want it to do. And it wasn't because he wanted to necessarily make money. He just wanted it to do what he wanted it to do for his personal pleasure.
Yeah.
And so he says, okay, if this doesn't do it, I'll make my own. And so then guys like Richard Stallman and Linus Torvalds, they go and they make Linux. And this is key because, and to prove my point that people don't think out of the box anymore, and they're really just building upon the status quo, which happens not just in the computer world, that happens in life in general, right? Okay.
Right.
The fact that how many other kernels are there? Kernels, I don't even necessarily mean, and kernels are what you build an operating system upon. Okay, this is the base level of software. How many other kernels are there besides Windows and Linux? Count them on your hand, because that's all there are. And even if that, it's like, well, there's the Android operating system. That's Linux.
What about Mac OS?
That's BSD,
which is Linux.
Which is essentially Linux, or they're very close relatives. Okay, so no one's really developing it. No one's thinking at that level, which is a shame because this is something that I talked about. I love this quote. I know I used it in the last episode. I use it again. Where Steve Jobs, when him and his wife were going to buy a sofa. Why do we need a sofa? You start at that base level when you go to do something. Okay, and nobody wants to go that far. They just want to keep building upon what's there, and I think that might be a recipe for failure. No one's thinking, hey, or some people are kind of thinking, maybe we should have a different TCP/IP implementation, meaning maybe we should have a different internet. Finally, some people are starting to talk about doing that. But it's very, very few that really think that way. They just want to keep building upon what's there. And I think that's damned limiting. It's okay. It's okay to build on the shoulders of giants, certainly. But I think it really might be limiting. We can think about cars that don't just have four wheels. You know what I mean? So anyway, I want to shift gears.
Everybody's inside the box.
That's right. Well, not everybody. So polyamory. Actually...
You got an email about polyamory.
Yeah, they really just wanted me to talk more about it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk about everything about it, necessarily that I want to say. But, what are your thoughts on polyamory?
Oh, boy, that's like saying, what are your thoughts on the history of the world?
Right. Well, you consider it ethical. And, of course, polyamory, give me a quick description of polyamory.
Okay, I would define it as the concept of not limiting love to one person as opposed to monogamy, which is the concept of only loving one person, limiting love to one individual at a time.
I like that. Mm-hmm. So it's about not being limiting, like we were just talking about.
Yeah. What it means to me is... What it means to some people, I think, is having lots of different relationships going on at the same time and sort of allowing each relationship to become whatever it's going to be. So for instance, if you're dating someone, if you're romantic with one person, you meet another person you really connect with, and you think that relationship could develop into a deeper, more intimate relationship that may have a sexual component, for instance, you don't stop that from happening because you already have a romantic partner.
Right.
That's what I think it would mean to a lot of people, just letting every relationship be whatever it's going to be. And maybe it's just going to be a relationship where you do a lot of cuddling, or where you have emotional intimacy or something like that. But just not limiting your relationships from becoming what they naturally feel like they're flowing into. To me, what it means is just having the option and the freedom to express, to be attracted to more than one person at the same time, if that's what I feel. You know, it doesn't mean forcing multiple relationships at once or necessarily desiring that. But Brian, like you and I are partners, and we have a freedom in our relationship where if we wanted to express to each other, if we wanted to talk about being attracted to somebody else or even act on it, like that would not be off limits. It doesn't mean we're going to do it. Right. It doesn't mean we're going to act on it, but it's not off the table. So there's definitely a freedom that comes with that, and a feeling of not being limited in your relationship.
Yeah, feeling of freedom, of personal freedom. Absolutely. So a lot of people, I think, would totally understand what you're saying there. But what the main question seemed to be is that how do you, and I'll ask this to you, how do you deal with jealousy? Your own jealousy. Like, does that come up as an issue for you? That seems to be what everybody gets closed off on.
Yeah, I think jealousy can be so many different things. Like, there's some polyamory website out there, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there's some polyamory website out there that talks about the 8-armed octopus of jealousy or something like that. Okay. And each of the 8 arms is like a need that's not being met. So perhaps you can identify feeling jealous, but what you really want is like more connection with your partner, or you want more, I don't know, you want to be heard more or something like that. There's needs underlying jealousy that can trigger that feeling of being jealous. Now, I get it, because the idea that love may be unlimited, but time is limited, really resonates with me. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I've had times in my life where I've dated several people at once, and it didn't work out very well for me because I just didn't have the time and energy to put into each of those relationships. It takes work to maintain. Right. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you just want to have multiple kind of light, not very intense relationships going on at once, and that could work well for you. It didn't work well for me because what I wanted was more intimacy and more time with each partner, and I wasn't able to do that. So it sounds like jealousy wasn't coming up for you at all. Well, it did actually in some of those situations, and I think it did come up for the other people that I was in relationships with, because there was this lack mentality, this feeling of like this partner is like a limited
of you wanting more resource. Time. Yeah.
Yeah, like their needs weren't being met or my needs weren't being met, and that's what led to the feelings of jealousy. And to a certain extent, like, yeah, those feelings can be completely legitimate. Like if you're not having as much time or as much closeness as you want with a partner, then that's just how you're feeling. You know, right. It's not that you're trying to own them or lord over them. That's a totally, like, all feelings are legitimate, but that's like a very legitimate feeling that I can understand. So maybe there's some of that going on. If you feel jealous, maybe you just need to connect a little bit more with the person.
That's an interesting point. I think I'll have to save it for next week. My response to dealing.
I'm curious what
jealousy.
You think about this. Can you extend the segment or?
No. Okay. But maybe we can talk about it during the climax. Actually, maybe we can talk about it a little bit during there. So, but that said.
So I guess to answer the question really succinctly of how do you deal with jealousy, listen to the jealousy and listen to what it's telling you, and then see if that's something that you can tweak or change to help you feel better.
Find out which need is actually needing to get addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, if you have more questions on that, don't hesitate. Email sovereigntech@riseup.net, and we'll get you in on important emails. Still got tons to get through, but keep them coming. I'll be back with more.
Hey, look! Got an energy spike. Hold on! Launch. Bombing the Narn back to the Stone Age wasn't enough for you?
Then we heard it. The sound of something terrible being born.
This is madness. Station 3 to Commander Ivanova.
Centauri have launched a full-scale assault.
Time is coming on! It's our turn now!
2 million tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. A world where empires rise and fall, where dreams are born and die, where war and hatred are challenged by love and faith. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace, for victory, for freedom. It is Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5. Agent Sovryn, go to this webpage and follow. What kind of webpage is this? Is that Natalia? I better go to the
Website of the Week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I share a website that's interesting, useful, whatever. It's something I want to share with you. So, and this week's Website of the Week is actually pretty important. And it's the EFF. We mentioned Reset the Net earlier, Stephanie, and the EFF is holding a Tor challenge. Now, Tor, of course, is the onion router. This is a layer, essentially, that works on the, on the internets, an anonymity layer that you can only access using certain software. And that software requires various people to act as relays, not necessarily as Tor servers, but as relays to where you can exit the Tor, network and then and then send the information to where it needs to go. Okay. I'm probably doing a terrible job of explaining what an exit relay is, but the EFF wants more people to be exit relays. These are the most important areas or the most important uses of the Tor network.
Yeah. So this is interesting because isn't there kind of like a problem with this? Because people have gotten in trouble for acting as Tor exit nodes, right? Yeah,
and that's what I wanted to discuss is now the website's in the show notes. It's EFF.org/Tor challenge. Okay, to go do this.
They're essentially like the interface between the regular internet and the
essentially
Tor, and you can track them, right? And so people have been found to be acting as Tor exit nodes and have been rated and stuff, right?
Right, because your Tor anonymizes your IP address, your device's IP address, essentially. And so if you become an exit relay, you become the IP address for whatever happens. And you don't know, it's all randomized. You have no idea, who could be using your exit relay. Okay. But this is the thing, is that if more people use it, if more people become exit relays, it becomes kind of almost a tragedy of the commons to some degree, where essentially, there's anonymity built in the fact that, hey, look, everybody does this.
That would be a comedy of the commons.
Or comedy. I'm sorry, not tragedy. Comedy of the commons. Yeah, exactly.
But it's a tragedy. I think it's a tragedy of the commons that nobody wants to be an exit node.
Yes. Yes, it is. Right. So, a comedy of the commons. Thank you. And, so I really do want to recommend people do this, and you can register your exit relay with the Tor challenge, and there are prizes involved in doing so, but they want you to run it for at least 12 months. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there is risk.
The prize is you get a DEA team showing up at your door. Just kidding.
Yeah, well, and you get to hang out in a federal prison resort. No.
Club Fed.
Yeah.
Just all expenses paid.
But I really do. I hope that more people do this. Yes, there is some risk, but this is, with any activism, there's always a degree of risk. Weigh it out for yourself.
But weigh it out. How do you know how risky it is?
Well, you can only base it on past history, which there isn't a terrible past history, but look into it for yourself. You can take the Tor challenge if you want. I'll be back with more.
Hey everybody, it's Stephanie. I am the Sovryn Tech producer, but did you know I am also a voiceover artist? Yes, it's true. I make audiobooks, commercials for your business. I narrate explainer videos. Pretty much any audio project that you can think of, I'm probably willing to work on it, or I have worked on it in the past. And if you want to hear some samples of my previous work, or you want to find out a little bit more about what I do, then I encourage you to check out my voiceover website, which is smvoice.info, smvoice.info. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
Who knew you could ride a bike so well?
I don't know if I can get us away from that helicopter. Don't you have a gun?
Oh, there's never a need for lethal force. I'll handle this.
How did you do that?
We'll be fine. A quick hack solves everything.
Hacksec.
It is time for Hacksec, where the section that we talk about security. And of course, today I am joined by the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Thank you so much for being on.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I love that last bit, that last intro. That's probably my favorite of the bunch. I don't know. What did you think of it?
I like them all.
Yeah.
They were all just so fun. I love how they come together and tell a story.
Yeah, and they're relevant to to what we're talking about. And I think it's probably most people's favorite is the Climax.
The Climax.
Anyway. So this week, well, before I get into the main story this week, which is talk about another creepy thing about adult Americans, we are finding out that there are a whole hell of a lot more open SSL issues than just Heartbleed. There have been a couple that have come out, Cupid, and then there's another one, I think it was called Injection. Just really bad. Where now these Heartbleed bugs that I'm talking about actually require what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack, okay, which would... essentially, someone's got to be there between you and the server you're communicating. It's not just like an open issue like Heartbleed was. Okay, but these are still pretty serious, and they would give you access to all different kinds of metadata. It's a real issue. So again, my solution, as always with a lot of this stuff, is use ProXPN. Use a VPN service. ProXPN's the best in the business.
Oh, so that would fix it, huh?
I think that would help out a lot with this. Of course, now if ProXPN's using OpenSSL, okay, that could be a problem, right? But this
if they are or they are.
Well, I imagine it's built into it, but it depends on the version. But this is the importance, because I've actually had this asked, is that a lot of people say, look, there's a lot of free VPNs out there. Why don't I just use a free one? If you're not already donating, now ProXPN, use the code FTL20, you get $5 off. Or, I mean, it ends up being $5 a month if you get a good plan with them. Okay, not $5 off. It's 20% off.
That's peanuts.
Yeah, or if you use Bitcoin, whatever, for a VPN service. If you're not already donating $5 a month to the free VPN service you're using, I mean, maybe you don't have the money, but I'm going to make a judgment and say you're an asshole. Like, I mean, they're providing such a great service to you, for crying out loud.
Oh yeah,
give them something. I don't care how. Rise Up takes Bitcoin. Okay. I mean, there's lots of ways to get money anonymously to these people. All right.
Do the free ones have ads or something? Like, how do they operate?
It depends on what it is. Some of them have ads, some of them have limitations and whatever, and then you're getting what you pay for. But this is the other issue I want to bring up, is that if you're not paying for a VPN service, if the ProXPN is they're doing this business out of the right mentality, as in they're essentially anarchists, okay, but also they want to make money off of the deal. Now, because of that, they have the incentive to make sure that OpenSSL is updated, make sure their servers are solid. There's just the modern world business incentives that we live with today. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's the incentive that's there to make sure their stuff is updated. Those free guys, I wouldn't trust them to update shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why would they?
I mean, out of personal passion, fine. But I know the VPN services out there that have personal passion. Okay. And, there are very few. And because of their personal passion, you should be giving them money anyway. All right. Which costs just as much as using ProXPN or some other guys, but I recommend ProXPN. So, that's
Think about all the things you probably pay for every month that cost way more than $5.
Absolutely.
And then that they provide way less value to you than having all your online communications encrypted with a VPN.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not communications, but all your web browsing and stuff.
Right. And then people say, well, look, I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about the NSA looking at me, whatever. Well, let's look at some pretty scary numbers here, which is actually our main story. Staggering figures. Half of all U.S. adults hacked in the last 12 months. And I bet you...
In the last year.
Yeah,
wow.
Half. 50%. How many people in America? 360 million, something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Half of that were hacked?
Jeez.
The first line of defense is a VPN. And I bet it could have cut this number, down to a tenth of what happened. I almost guarantee that. Okay? Can't say for certain, right? And hindsight's 20/20. But
it happens to the best of us. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
Like, what were the most common types of hacks? What do they mean when they say hack?
Well, I'll read a little bit into here, and I actually like to use the word crack, myself. Yeah. But I mean, when you're reading the story, you're reading the story. That's what they said, online computer crackers, have infiltrated and exposed the personal information of 110 million Americans, nearly half of the U.S. adult population, over the last year alone, according to an alarming new report. The study, formulated by researchers at the Ponemon Institute, which measures data collection and information security in the public and private sectors, also determined that the number of cracked accounts belonging to those individuals numbered at or near 432 million. Many of these people victimized may have inadvertently made available to hackers their names, debit, credit card information, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, all the stuff, all the things. The news that so many people have been hacked comes on the heels of a series of vast security flubs at popular companies like Target and eBay. So, they're a huge issue. Snapchat admitted that 5 million users' accounts were hacked and 33 million Adobe users' credentials were also taken, along with more than 3 million stolen debit and credit card details. This is stuff we've been covering all year on Hacksec.
Yeah.
So, it's a culmination of a lot of these different stories. Most companies don't fully understand or address their security risks. Most U.S. organizations' cybersecurity capabilities do not rival the persistence and technological skills of their cyber adversaries. So they're not getting into a whole lot of detail, but they are telling you what cases they're talking about, like what happened with Snapchat, what happened with Adobe, what happened with a whole slew of these things. Now, some of those issues a VPN's not going to solve, okay, because it happened at Adobe's side.
Mm-hmm.
All right? But that should make you all the more concerned about securing your own metadata, because the people you're sending it to aren't doing their job.
Yeah, that's the reason why you really should use like a virgin password for every login, because if somebody hacks them, then they can't get to your other stuff.
Sure, and this is why I recommend using LastPass. LastPass does not send, all the encryption of your passwords. They never see your passwords. They have no clue what your passwords are at LastPass. They only, offer the software that allows you to implement them well. Okay. And so, I mean, the 50% of Americans hacked.
That's just in the last year. I mean, if you take that, is it the same 50% that got hacked last year?
Right. And this is the thing, by bolstering your own security on your digital devices and learning how that's done allows you to demand better from these companies that have gotten hacked. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that seems to be the large part of this, is that a lot of it was done from companies that, weren't putting in best practices. Now granted, when a company relies on OpenSSL, what are you going to do? And they fix it pretty quickly, but a lot of them just don't have the knowledge. And I think that proves the point of that. We're in this society, we're in this digital society that, no one's really paid attention to the security enough, except for a scant few, and that needs to change. That goes back to what we were talking about. Everything is broken, and so.
But okay, to play devil's advocate here, if everything is broken, then does it even matter if you try to pay attention to your security? Is there even a point to putting effort into it?
I think so, because you can, when you learn more, it's just like with your health. If you don't know that eating Reese's peanut butter cups is bad for you all the time, I'm not saying having it every once in a while is bad for you, but all the time, you'll just keep doing it, and you just don't know. You just kind of get this feeling, right, that you don't feel well. And so being knowledgeable as to why something isn't working really, really helps. And then once everybody kind of becomes knowledgeable, then these systems can, this stuff won't happen anymore. Once everybody kind of becomes knowledgeable.
But I don't know. I mean, but isn't that like, to follow up with your analogy, isn't that like if you're eating Reese's peanut butter cups all the time and then you find out it's bad for you, so you stop and you start eating cabbage instead. And then like a few years later, there's a study that comes out that said cabbage is just as bad for you as Reese's peanut butter cups, Well, there's always going to be 0 days. Okay. Yeah. Like there's always going to be something, but the more knowledgeable you are, I think the more you can know what to do when these things occur. And I mean, like the eBay hack that happened recently, that was going on for months. It was going on for months before eBay said anything, and that's before
crazy.
eBay noticed it.
Now keep in mind, like I said, I mentioned how making money is an incentive for security. Yes, for security companies. That doesn't mean it's an incentive for Adobe, for eBay. Their incentive is to get product out to you. Okay, as to where with security companies, when you're paying them, that's a different story. Their incentive is to make sure you're fucking secure, so that's those are very different ideologies there. And so, sure, there's always going to be 0 days. You're absolutely right, but that doesn't, I hate to use the word vigilance. I don't like that.
It's not totally futile. It's
not totally futile, and anything we can do to even just fuck with the NSA and all these groups, I think is great. Even just to give them a hard time is a good thing to do. So I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. Hey, everybody. I really appreciate all of you that listen to Sovryn Tech. I hope you have as much fun listening to the show as I do making it. And hey, if you have a good time listening or learn something from listening, you can donate to the show. Just look in the show notes at sovryntech.com. There you'll see addresses for Bitcoin, BLACKCOIN, Next, LITECOIN, whole slew of ways to donate to the show. And believe me, I'm not going to complain if you only send 2 millibits or what equates to $2, unlike some people. But, also you can donate via PayPal using the affiliate links on the left-hand side of sovryntech.com. And oh yes, please feel free to use those affiliate links. You can also help the show by circling me on Google+, following me on Twitter, or following Sovryn Tech on SoundCloud. Anything you can do to help, believe me, it helps. So I love all of you, and thank you so much for listening. Now let's get back to more Sovryn Tech. Well, looks like we made it out of the country. Good driving. Let's find some place to relax.
Somewhere with a nice big bed, I think. Let me pull up an app.
Sounds good to me.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover software that I consider useful. Sometimes it's terrible, but this week it's something that's pretty useful, and it might seem obvious, but it's really not that obvious, and it's an Android app, and it's the Android app for Wikipedia.
Oh.
Yeah, which some would think, woohoo, there's been a Wikipedia app for a while, okay, but all it really was just a kind of a shell for your, for your browser that would show you, that would take you to Wikipedia. It was just like a shortcut, not a big deal. But now they have, and this is actually Wikipedia Beta, of course, the link is in the show notes. It'll take you right to the Play Store to get it. And this app is, I love it. It's a native app. It's not just a shell for your browser anymore. And it allows for quite a few different things. First off, it runs, in my opinion, it runs a lot better because it's not relying on the dependencies of the extensions of your browser, which sometimes I found would cause issues. So it has its own rules. It doesn't allow for being offline. I can't even imagine what it would take to have an offline Wikipedia. Yeah. Of course, I think that's what some people were kind of looking for. But it has a lot of features, one of which is it now allows you to edit Wikipedia.
Wow.
On mobile.
That's so cool.
Yeah, which is great because
compare that to like the bookshelf with the 26 volumes of dusty encyclopedias that are incomplete and written by gatekeepers,
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think it works really, really well. It has a whole lot of settings that you can put into it now. It gives you now some may consider this good or bad. Of course, I think it can be turned off, but it allows you a history of searches so that you can go back on that. One can say, yeah, I could have already done that with my browser. Okay, good for you, but this just makes it a lot more convenient. And I thought it was really, really handy. And especially the fact, again, I like the fact that it's a native app now and that it's not just a shell, because I was running into sometimes my browsers on my Android device are pretty locked down, and it can actually hinder to some degree Wikipedia's ability, and this is no longer so. Also, it does a great job of, again, the history thing I think is actually pretty important, because a lot of times I will close my browser, because I don't want it constantly running, because my browser is the only way I look at Facebook. I have no Facebook apps on my phone whatsoever. Okay.
Good for you.
Yeah, and so Facebook's, kind of with the browser, it's sending up data back and forth all the time. Now, I have an unlimited data plan, as do you, Stephanie, so it's not really an issue.
And by the way, if you want an unlimited data plan, you can use the Sovryn Tech link to sign up for Sprint, and
that's right.
Get some money.
Yeah,
right?
I think you get $50 or $75 if you do that, if you go with Sprint. Which Sprint, boy, this is interesting. I hear Sprint might be buying T-Mobile.
Oh,
for
that
quite
would be
a few billion.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually, I think that, I don't know. There's people that are kind of, if they implement T-Mobile's like international data thing, I think that'd be great, where they don't charge more for international data.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would be totally game from doing it that way then. But there's a lot of people who are kind of enthusiasts for T-Mobile, so they might be mad about it. But anyway, I have unlimited data, but I mean, I don't always want, Facebook going back and forth even within my browser as far as sending up data goes. And so I'll close my browser a lot. But when you do that, you lose, you can lose a lot of the web pages you're using, depending on which browser you're using, of course. Okay. And so it's nice to have that Wikipedia to like flip back and forth with it. Okay. And have it not be, within the same browser instance. And that way you can just, really quick reference. I like it. I thought it was really good of them to come up with it and to finally release it, and for Wikipedia to be taken seriously. It'd be pretty cool if they did something like a Pocket implementation to where you could have offline Wikipedia articles, like just so many. And maybe that's something that's coming. So, but I'm just glad that Wikipedia is taking it a lot more seriously. And we love Wikipedia. You love Wikipedia.
Oh my God, it's awesome. I went to medical school for 2 years, and this was in 2006 to 2008. And people in my med school class would constantly use Wikipedia for their medicals.
Oh yeah,
like to look up medical stuff. It was great. It was very complete.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the nice thing too, is that actually if you're going to reference, now that Wikipedia is kind of a separate app, if you're going to reference, it's a native app, you can open the browser and it doesn't link out from that article. So again, like I said, you can do that really quick reference between the two. I like it. I know it's a simple thing, but it's simple, a sign of more features to come. Yeah, and incredibly
and
useful.
How far we've come from the dusty encyclopedia books.
Oh man, that's awesome. It's all in your pocket. But then, why are there so many stupid people?
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Oh, Natalia.
Oh, it feels so good. I'm so close.
I know what you need.
The climax.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great.
Oh yeah,
a great bumper.
Wow. And anyway, I'm glad this show is only audio. Anyway, real quick, I made a bit of a comment at the end there. I don't get it. This is something actually. Speaking of something the Christians say, is that there's so many so many Christians don't know anything about the Bible, but the Bible is so readily accessible today as to where before it used to be even illegal, like it was punishable by death to translate the Bible into your native tongue. And so why don't, there's so much information out there, and yet people don't have like a store of, and I'm using the word knowledge. Yes, I'm glad you know what Kim Kardashian did yesterday. Okay, but I'm talking about like facts. Like knowledge, like actual tidbits of information, not this stuff. Now, I mean, granted, should I put such importance on those, on having that factual knowledge? Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe that's all value is subjective, right?
That's such an interesting question because, like, I hear people complain sometimes that, nobody knows phone numbers anymore.
Right.
But, like, you don't need to be taking up space in your brain with that, right?
That's true.
Especially if there's a limited amount of space in your brain to remember things. You really don't need to be filling it with stuff that you don't actually need to remember because it's written down and it's accessible, as long as you know how to access it.
Yeah, that's true. But and this isn't actually the climax the topic I want to talk about. But let's touch
up to it.
Let's touch on let's touch on this a little bit, because this is a real issue I have. Is that I keep hearing how all these productivity apps and how the cloud and the digital world and all this stuff frees up everybody's time and frees up everybody's mentality. Like they use Evernote and they can put stuff down. And I keep asking, well, then what the fuck are they filling it with? Because I try to talk to these people about things and they look at me like I'm an alien. They're like, well, what are you talking about?
Well, you are an alien.
Well, I'm a lizard. I don't know if
why
I'm
they look at you that way.
But it's just like, oh, that's great. I mean, because I think your point's valid. Knowing phone numbers isn't really important. Who cares?
No,
okay?
Long division.
Right.
That shit. Nobody needs that.
Sure, but what are they putting into their brain instead? Like, I'm not seeing the benefit of not knowing, because that's saying, okay.
Well, touche, Brian. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, because
I don't see people having more free time or less stress. They're just kind of cluttered still, but with just different things.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, okay, so I don't have to remember phone numbers, so then I can think about other things. And I'm just not seeing the benefit of what these other things are that people are thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, speaking of how things used to be, I would like to set the Wayback Machine.
Ooh, boy.
For the Paleolithic.
Oh, yes.
We're going
to the cave, baby.
We're going to the cave. Back to the cave. That's one of my favorite Lita Ford songs.
Me Tarzan, you Jane.
Yeah.
I mean, me Jane.
Yeah, you. Wow, you.
I'm not sure if I'm Jane or Tarzan.
Yeah, you be whatever you want. Anyway, so I want to talk about essentially, what was life like back in the Paleolithic, and what I mean by this is the time frame before humanity, okay, still Homo sapiens, or Pan-sapiens as I like to call them, before they started agriculture. This is before the Neolithic.
Homophobic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I just like
it's just pandering.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the reason I use the word pan-sapien, I like to use that. It is a jab at humanity. Okay. Because the word, is it sapien that means knowledge?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so, and like, there's this idea like Homo sapiens that somehow we're something so damned amazing. And it's like, well, really, how much better than the chimpanzees have we ended up being? We're still offing each other in record numbers. Mm-hmm. We're still raping. We're still doing all these terrible things that dolphins do and that chimps do and that all these other species do. And so that's why I like to use the word pan-sapien, to somehow say that homo, which means man, is somehow greater, has yet to be proven. Or maybe at one point, and this is the thing I want to discuss and I want to explore with you, Stephanie, is that maybe at one point we did have it. Maybe we did actually evolve to something more interesting, more mature, perhaps. And, I'm using a lot of judgment words here, but
this is going to be a cool thought experiment.
Yeah, because I think when most people think about cavemen, okay, they contemplate, the guy used to, he had a club, beat his woman over the head and dragged her back to the cave and fucked her. It was all survival of the fittest, or within like the human quote unquote hierarchy at the time. You had the alpha male that beat up all the other males, and
there are people who think it's still like that.
Yeah. Well, they're creating
women are genetically programmed to go after alpha males, and they want the beta provider and ride the alpha cock carousel. I've heard that phrase so many freaking times, not just from one person. And it's really sad because no, it doesn't have to be like that. And actually, there are some evolutionary biologists who have alternative theories to that, like sex at dawn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes well beyond.
Ryan.
Yep. And it goes well beyond that even. Or there's the idea that, that their hygiene was terrible, that they smelled.
Yeah. And that's even being challenged now because there could be probiotic bacteria, just like there are in the gut. There are probiotic bacteria on the skin that convert the sweat into chemicals that don't smell.
Right. Now, let's go ahead. Let's start right there with the simple fact that humans, again, when I use the word humans now, I'm meaning in the Paleolithic times, okay, that they were not just instantaneously offending each other with their hygiene, with their scent, okay? So you're saying, and you are a biochemist? I
have a PhD in biochemistry, and I attended med school for 2 years.
Okay.
That actually discredits with some people probably because they think it's bad because I went to because I'm an Ivy League liberal, effete liberal in my academic ivory tower.
Yeah, you're on the inside. So, but anyway,
take it from whatever that means to you. That is my background.
So you're saying that essentially there were bacteria that humans naturally encountered?
Well, maybe. I mean, where I got this idea was by reading, there was a journalist who wrote a piece for the New York Times recently where there's some company that got founded by people who worked at MIT or something, and they studied horses. Horses sweat a lot, but they don't smell. They don't stink.
Right.
Okay, so why do they sweat so much but don't stink, right? They're covered in fur. They're probably, you would expect them to smell bad, but they don't. The reason is because they roll around in the dirt, and there's these bacteria in the dirt that convert it's probably urea or something to nitrates or nitrites on the skin that don't smell.
Right.
And the bacteria are probiotic bacteria that are found in the dirt, and the horses roll around the dirt to get them. Now, humans could have these too, and perhaps they wouldn't smell. So they tested this by culturing those bacteria and making a spray that people could spray on their skin. But the catch is that you can't use soap or shampoo because those would kill the good bacteria. So this journalist tried it for a month. She didn't use any soap or shampoo for an entire month, and she just doused herself down with these bacteria, and she said she didn't smell.
Right.
She went to the gym, she sweated, she did all this stuff. She didn't smell. So perhaps that was the natural state of things. I mean, why would we have armpit hair and pubes to so-called trap the pheromones or trap our scent if the scent was so bad and offensive that it turned people away? That doesn't really make sense,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there is an argument to be made, and this is the thing with the internet, is you can back up your argument either way. Okay, but it's important to still make the arguments, in my opinion. And so that's what I'm wanting to do here. And so the idea that humans had bad hygiene, that they smelled, isn't so. There's also data.
What about teeth? I mean, people think that your teeth just fell out at a certain age, and that's why we have wisdom teeth.
Next. Yeah,
and that's not necessarily true. I mean, eating crunchy foods like raw vegetables and stuff can clean the teeth pretty well. There may have been other things like oil, rinsing the mouth out with oily substances or fats or whatever.
Yeah, which I do today. I oil pull with coconut oil, and my teeth feel amazing.
Clay, apparently, now you're starting to see clay appearing in toothpaste, and that's probably not a new idea. Like, people may have actually brushed their teeth with clay in the past.
So dental issues may not have existed at all, and in fact, there's proof of this. Skull 5, I talk about this one often, but there's other examples.
Apparently, there are lots of skeletons from pre-agricultural days that have full sets of teeth, have very healthy, strong bones, tall people, beautiful physique from their bones. Anyway.
Yeah, judging by their bones, which you can get a pretty good makeup of what that was like. And these are from 80,000 years ago. I mean, if not older.
They look better than we do.
Right. So there's no reason to say that somehow they had bad hygiene. Not true. Okay. Now, the other point, and this is something that is getting explored quite a bit recently, though it's been discussed even just 100 years ago, there was a lot of these theories being discussed, but they all got shot down, was that it was not... Humans were not a violent, and I'm not going to get into chimpanzees and bonobos, so you can look into that for yourself. I think it's a great example, but it's kind of an overused example. Okay. But we are finding out that it was not survival of the fittest, but survival of the nicest. That actually,
nice.
And there's a lot of anthropological data coming out about this, that the alpha male was not judged by the fact that he could beat the shit out of another male. It was judged by how well he could hunter-gather, how well that he could collect, how well he could store, it was literally how smart he was. It was not his physical ability.
And if he was so good at collecting, he probably would share that with other people because he gets the surplus, right?
Yeah. And so, like, the idea is that women would have actually been more attracted to, a man's collecting abilities, and not the fact it's not like, oh, I'm so attracted to the violent act that just occurred where he beat the crap out of that beta male. Ooh, I'm so hot under the collar right now.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make sense. I mean, humans probably face so many threats from outside of humanity, like from tigers and shit like that, and starvation and weather and everything, that it doesn't make sense for them to be constantly trying to kill each other, No.
And this is the other point to bring up is the Toba supervolcano, which I mentioned long before Cosmos did, by the way. A recent episode of the new show Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about the Toba supervolcano, and I've been talking about it forever. But anyway, that shows that there were, that humanity, this is 70,000 years ago, got whittled down pretty good to a few thousand, if not less. And again, if it was all about proving who's the tougher guy, we would. I just think about that for a moment.
How would that have lasted?
You would have never gotten as far. We would have never become the millions and now billions of people that we are.
You almost wonder if somebody, some anthropologist or whatever, just kind of projected that idea because they themselves were coming from a very lack mentality of scarcity. Sure. I feel like there's a lot of scarcity in my own life, so it was probably way worse in Paleolithic days, and they were all fighting each other for resources, when it may have been the exact opposite. There may have been abundant resources.
Yeah.
I mean, some studies have shown that in 20 hours a week, you could hunt or gather more than enough food for a family or a tribe, or if everybody was, if there were a couple adults doing it, and the kids would watch and learn how to do it themselves. And then you'd have a lot of leisure time for play and interaction and sex and everything else.
Yeah, and this is another thing that's talked about a lot, is that actually hunter-gatherers, Paleolithic humans, had tons of leisure time. And this is not new. Like, a lot of people, they've theorized this for decades, that this was so. And I think that's interesting. And then you get into the sexual aspects of things. And I'm still looking for this, where someone says that we evolved to monogamous relationships.
Well, people say it. It doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
We've also, undeniably, we also have a drive for novelty, every animal has that, but humans, you could totally argue. That's why porn is so interesting to most people, because it's always a constant stream of new sexual people to look at. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this novelty. I mean, there's the idea that I've discussed before that the reason that people moan, during sex is because it's a call to the tribe to come on in. You know what I mean? It's not a call for privacy, stay away. It's like, hey, I need help. And that's why, actually, there was the 90 Seconds on Sex. Paul Joannides was mentioning how close the sounds of pain are to the sounds of sex. Both of the reason they're close is because they're both a call for help.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when it gets to sex, that can be as a sexy a fact as you want it to be. Okay.
What about the idea that women can have multiple orgasms, right?
Right.
Why is that?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of common sense being done here, but that's a lot of times how anthropology works. Okay, is that it's based upon a degree of common sense, and just...
What about the argument, it just kind of came up for me that a lot of people will say, yeah, well, that may have been how it was in Paleolithic times. We don't know for sure, but that may have been how it was. But that doesn't mean that now we can't get beyond that with our rational brains. We can't choose monogamy as if it's the better enlightened path or whatever.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's actually the point I want to get to, is that, and hey, look, if the fact that I'm running a science and tech show, isn't proof that I love technology and I'm not a Luddite, I don't know what is, okay? But is civilization detrimental to human health? Okay.
It seems like most things that are most of the things that are the norm in civilization, you could argue that they're opposite of what we have been doing for a lot of humanity, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Does that make us happy?
Right. I mean, and even take something like sex, okay, which there's what's called the Red Queen theory, which essentially means that sex is a byproduct of, an ecological system, an entire ecological system working within itself to propagate itself. Okay, not necessarily genetic determinism, but certainly genetic determinism can fit within that. Civilization, agriculture alone, okay, that means farming, is destroying those ecological systems. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. Okay, I think there's a ton of evidence that agriculture is actually destructive to the earth itself. Because what happens is that when you start farming, you wipe out the biodiversity that exists within an area. And that biodiversity is actually what creates resistant systems. It's what biodiversity is what allows for the Red Queen theory is what allows for people to live on past bacterial infections and viruses. Mm-hmm. Okay, because it just these things naturally. That's how evolution works. That's the real survival of the fittest. Is that the ecological systems work in harmony with each other. And agriculture alone, I think, harms that. Agriculture also, and I think a great case can be made for this, is the onset of government. The most destructive force against humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right, because before agriculture, there was nothing to tax.
Right. We were nomadic, probably, by and large.
Yeah.
And we were
probably
moving
didn't
around.
Have a lot of possessions.
Yeah. How could you tax people? How could you, you can't control people when they're nomadic.
Once they start staying around in one place and once they start farming rice or grains or whatever, and then it's really easy for some group of people with a lot of force to go around and say, give me 10% of that. Right. Or I'm going to hurt you.
Right.
Give me 20% or whatever, Right.
So you have moving out of the Paleolithic human lifestyle has created two things that harms humans, in my opinion. And that is that it's eliminated biodiversity. So you've created who knows what, or at least you've eliminated the chances for things to get cured, perhaps like cancer. Okay. Thinking like Medicine Man. Where,
right.
Where certain species of things that maybe could have naturally cured cancer are gone. Okay. And then you've got governments which are killing people by the millions for, as long as they've been around. Mm. And so my question is society that we hold up, civilization that we say, look at what we've done, we as humans, so grand? Or maybe it isn't. Mm. Maybe we've de-evolved.
It's really easy to feel like everything you've been taught is wrong.
Yeah.
You just want to do something completely different. I'm not ready to go live in a yurt.
Me neither.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready to stop doing a podcast because it's technology. But at the same time, I question shoes. I question shampoo. I question monogamy. I question eating grains. All that stuff. I question governments for sure. That was one of the first things.
Absolutely. And I want to bring up a point quick too, is that a lot of people say, but Brian, how could we have, learned so much, all this science? How could we have known all that without all this technology? Look, most science was discovered even thousands of years ago through very simple things. We knew the Earth. We knew the circumference of the Earth. We knew the Earth was round, judging by shadows and two sticks in ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Scientific discoveries don't require computers. They never have.
Yeah, the density of gold, that famous experiment with the water displacement, right?
The size of the universe was done with just optics. Mm-hmm. There's no need for, I'm not saying this stuff is bad. I'm just saying, you can't just come out and say, well, without all this stuff, we wouldn't know all this. We wouldn't have the wonderful knowledge we have today. I don't know that that's true. Mm. And I don't know. I don't
know if it makes sense to glorify, things like cities. Like Ayn Rand was really strong on that.
Yeah.
Like, skyscrapers and cities were like the pinnacle of human achievement. But
right.
And I'm not saying like we should all be crawling around in the dirt, but like there is a real scientific beauty and a real early humans had to be super scientific and connected with reality and rational, because if they weren't, they'd get killed. Like if they walked around saying, yeah, man, reality is created by my perception, like they would never find any food, you know? Like they had to like know how to track animals. They had to realize when the sun was rising and setting. They had to have a sense of time. They had to be very connected to the world. And so maybe we should stop thinking of them as a bunch of savages who were killing and raping and religious, and think and appreciate what they actually accomplished, which is a lot.
Yeah, I pose the question. I think human nature was peaceful, in that Neolithic nature is the violent thing. I wonder. Anyway, thank you so much for being on, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I really
appreciate
it. You can email me, sovereigntech@riseup.net. Carpe Lucem. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.